So from parents, one huge misconception is that my kiddo can't be constipated, they're pooping every day. Well, even if they're pooping every day, they might not be getting everything out. And if they're not getting everything out, then it just continues to back up in the colon even more.
Here we go. Brewing up another episode. Kiley Gibbs is on the show. Kiley, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
When I was doing my research, and I on purpose try to do as little research as possible because I like to come at topics with sort of like this like real perspective, right? I don't want to, because then I feel like I skip over some of the things. I'm like, well, everybody probably knows that because I just researched it, but I don't want to do that.
Right.
When I was looking at the topic, at least, I was like, okay, when I hear pelvic health, I think most people think the same way I do because that's how people work. We always just figure we're like everybody else. I think of females first, right, and then probably males, because then you're like, well, males also have pelvises. But then I don't even know if I've ever thought of pediatric pelvic health. So I'm guessing nobody else did. And we were just talking before I hit record, like we didn't get much education in that.
No, not at all. It wasn't until I did a residency program after PT school that I even was aware of it. And so I started observing some sessions. We had actually 3 or 4 providers in our office at University of Michigan that treated pediatric pelvic health or were learning and starting to treat pediatric pelvic health. So I observed and said, wow, this is really cool. We can make a huge impact, not only on the kiddos that we're treating, but on the whole family unit, because you will find these parents that their life revolves around when their child has a bowel movement. If their child needs a change of clothes, they have to pack 3 or 4 or 5 changes of clothes every day because these kiddos are just going through them because they're having accidents all the time. So that's only when I first started learning about it was during a residency.
Yeah. Where'd you do that residency again? You said in Michigan?
Yeah, University of Michigan.
Nice. All right. So who do you get to work with? Because you got like a cool practice model, right? You're sort of like you have a home office and or your remote office, which you mentioned was your car. Who do you get to work with? So to describe the kiddos and the families that you interact with.
So actually about 30% of my caseload are kiddos of healthcare providers, funny enough. I see a lot of kiddos of PTs. I've treated surgeons' kids, lots and lots of healthcare providers bring their kiddos in because they know that they're missing something and it's not logical the way that these things come about. And so they're saying, well, I need some help. Found you. So the kiddos that I treat, range anywhere from 8 or 9 months old. They've just transitioned onto solids and maybe they're having some constipation from that. And moms and dads just want to learn what they can do all the way up until 18, 19 is really where I stop. Unless they're having any sort of internal issues, then I refer them out to an adult pelvic health therapist.
19 years old, right? Not 19 months.
Yeah, 19 years old. Yeah. So right now, the oldest I have in caseload is 18.
Yeah, I get confused a lot when people go from months and then they go to years. I'm like, are we still talking in months here? How old are we? Are we months or are we years? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. So the goal here was, I think I saw you on Instagram and you were like sort of sharing information. Is that right? Is that where we kind of crossed paths? Yeah. So the goal was like, I remember I love just like how the internet works where you're just kind of swiping, flicking, whatever. And then you come across something like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And that's sort of what I thought. And really started to kind of like, go down that rabbit hole. And I was like, well, then we got to have Kiley on the show. So the goal is by the time we're done talking, the audience is at least going to know 6 things, maybe 4 of them they didn't know before. I feel like, because as you mentioned, I mean, we weren't even thinking about pelvic issues in kids, but also as you explain the families that you're working with, that sort of makes sense when you start to put it that way. When you start to put a face to it, it does. So the first thing I want to talk to you did mention constipation, but you mentioned that incontinence is often a symptom of constipation. Help me figure out how that works.
Yeah, so whenever kiddos are having any sort of urinary incontinence or fecal incontinence, it's normally because there's some sort of backup happening in the rectum of
Mm.
poop. So either they're not getting everything out every single day, or they're only having one bowel movement every 2 weeks. Those are kiddos that I see a lot. But anytime that you're having any sort of urinary fecal incontinence, it's because for urinary, the bladder is being squished by the rectum that is full of poop. And so it cannot fill to what it normally would or what it needs to. And then the bladder contracts and lets everything out. With poop, the newer poo, and yeah, we're definitely going to get right in and talk about poo. The newer poo just goes right around the older hardened poop that's in the
But it
rectum.
does?
hmm
I had
And
no
that's
idea.
what's called, yeah, and that's what's called encoparesis. So these kiddos who are having fecal leakage have some sort of blockage, if you will, that newer poop that's more liquid will just go right around. And I always use the analogy for parents, it's sort of like pouring pudding over ice. So it will slowly just make its way around, not for a gross graphic, but it will slowly make its way around. And what sneaks out is still really soft. So they think there's no way my kid can be constipated. The poop that's coming out is super soft, but that's because it's just leakage coming around.
I love how your analogies are food based and very pediatric food based. You're like, you understand your
Always,
audience. Yeah, you get who.
always food based.
All right. Well,
Yeah, always
that's
food based.
that sort of makes sense in terms of incontinence and constipation. So many might believe kids are always aware of when they have, we'll call it an accident, but you actually think this is a misconception. From your experience, this is a misconception. So this is something we need to dispel. So walk me through this.
Definitely. So when kiddos have the backup of poop in their rectum, what happens is when we get poop that comes down into the rectum, it stretches the rectum. It sends the signal up to the brain that says, okay, it's time to go poop. We've got enough in there. Let's go ahead and let it out. If a kiddo is on the playground or in class or just says, no way, I am scared of that automatic flush toilet, I'm definitely not going here at school, I don't like going at grandma's house. Like if they find whatever reason and they shut that signal down, the brain tells the body, hold it in, and the pelvic floor muscles contract. Everything stays right up in there. And once they do that enough, once they keep deferring those signals, the brain and the bottom stop talking to each other. So we really get this disconnect. And there's the converse side of it too, that when there's always poop sitting in the rectum, just like if you are having your glasses on all day long or you're wearing a watch all day long, you become numb to it. So those sensations don't matter anymore when there's always poop backed up in there. So if you go back and you think about, okay, I'm driving in my car, oh my gosh, I've got to go poop. I can't go in the car. I don't want to pull over. I'm 10 minutes from home. I'll just go when I get home. When we get home, normally 10 or 15 minutes later, we'll get a much stronger signal. Kiddos that continue to defer those signals repeatedly don't get that
Hmm.
signal, that second, little bit louder signal. The one that they get is the emergency signal when the body goes, ready or not, here it comes, and starts to let it out. So we can retrain those signals and bring them back, but it does take a long time. The signals in my practice have been the last thing that I have experienced that will come back for a kiddo. So it does take a lot of time.
When you're saying, worked on or retrained, what do your sessions look like? Like describe them. And I'm sure there's some sort of food analogy coming, so I can't wait for it.
Yeah. So what we do is normally I will train the parents because most kiddos don't want to talk to me. They have been doctored out. So when I was in person, I do all of my sessions virtually right now. When I was in person, kiddos would hide behind the couch. They would hide under the table. I've had a couple kiddos, one girl in particular, I saw her off and on for like 2 years. She never spoke a word to me
Yeah.
directly. She was the most beautifully compliant, like 6-year-old I've ever seen, but she was done. She just voiced everything to her mom and mom voiced it to me. So I'm really training the parents in what to do. We have a homework chart. They check off different activities that they have capacity for. So retraining the signals, we use sort of an old school proprioceptive tool of vibration. So I have kiddos when they're home sit on a vibrating pad, and that can reawaken some of those signals. So if you think back to some neuromuscular recruitment techniques, you use vibration on a muscle to wake it up and regain those signals. Same thing with the bottom. So if you think of if you were to sit on your cell phone and you didn't realize you were sitting on it and somebody called you and it was on vibrate, you go, whoa, what's going on? So we're trying to make that happen with those signals.
If you haven't already started, I could feel the beginnings of an app, Kiley, that you could somehow code or work with the coder to create for just that thing. A little upset that there was no food analogies in that one, but I'm sure we still have some coming up.
We do.
Hey, where are you going with your PT career? That's not rhetorical. I want to know. Would you like to embark on an extraordinary patient care adventure? That's what they call it. Some people might call it travel therapy. Find out more at jacksontherapy.com. This is perfect for physical therapists who are eager to make their mark. Discover where your skills can take you at jacksontherapy.com with Jackson Therapy Partners. And here's a question for you. Are you frustrated with your EMR? Feel like it should do more, be easier? Yeah. Take the next step. Maybe try something new. How about an EMR that's all in one? Seamless integrations of patient portals, marketing automations, and billing, all at an unbeatable value. Plus, switching over is a breeze. See what you can do with MW Therapy and their all-in-one EMR at mwtherapy.com. And how would you like to boost your bottom line and help more people? You can do both of those things without having to work more. Smarter, not harder, kids. Boost your clinic's revenue by $290 per patient per quarter by adding remote therapeutic monitoring. You've heard about it, but you're like, I don't know where to get started. Is it complicated? Well, what if you knew where to get started and it wasn't complicated? That's what Physiotech is here for. Kickstart your RTM at physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca right now with Physiotech. So here's a misconception that I think I was also on the wrong side of this. You tell me. You've observed that pelvic floor muscles in children are often tight, not weak, and that's where the issue comes in. So walk me through that. Then how does that sort of like guide your approach?
Yeah, so with kiddos, if they are trying to hold everything in, so think back to those signals. I'm deferring the signal that I need to go to the bathroom. I don't want to go. I don't have time to go. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. The pelvic floor muscles have to tighten up and hold everything in. So we often see that this repeated behavior shortens those muscles and tighten, so that when they need to go and they're trying to let everything out, the pelvic floor muscles aren't able to relax and fully help to evacuate either the bowel or the bladder. And so instead of doing contractions, I've had so many families come to me and say, well, our pediatrician just told us to do Kegels, just start contracting the pelvic floor. And that's not what we want to do. We do want to retrain the muscles and tell them how to contract but relax properly, because that's what we need to do. So we do a lot of stretching. It depends on what activities they're involved in. I've treated different figure skaters, hockey players, and even just some kiddos that, W-sit, their core is super weak. So figuring out what other parts of their body are contributing to that tightness in the pelvic floor is what we also address too. But they're just super, super tight because they're trying to hold it in. And for most kiddos that have any sort of accidents during the day, they are so afraid of having another accident that they are constantly clenching and trying their hardest to hold it in. And it's pretty logical on their part. Like, why wouldn't I try and squeeze and hold it in? But then everything just gets super tight. One analogy I tell parents is that if you've ever been driving and you have your hands on the steering wheel in traffic, and then all of a sudden you're out of traffic and you go, whoa, I had no idea I was clenching the wheel like that. It's sort of like that with the pelvic floor muscles. We have to retrain them how to relax.
How do you educate parents in terms of spotting when these things are going on? I mean, I know from indirect experience, there's some behavior changes or things. I mean, and parents are just crazy. I mean, some parents are crazy in tune with their kids. Like they know exactly what's going on in their kid's brain.
Yeah. And, I have a 2.5-year-old and I can tell you exactly, what she's going to do before she does it. And, even before she farts, like if you think of the homunculus, the genitalia sits right next to toes and feet. And so a lot of kiddos will go up on their tippy toes and try and contract everything, or you see them do completely straight leg or slam their legs together, trying to hold everything in. And they don't even realize they're doing it a lot of times, or they'll get in different positions positions. I've got one kiddo who will completely like get into a ball if he is watching TV or something, and his mom's like, dude, you need to go poop. He's like 7 or 8. He's like, no, I don't. She's like, you are in a ball trying to hold yourself together. You need to go poop. So they don't even realize a lot of times that they're doing these things. And if you've ever seen a kiddo do a pee-pee dance, they're wiggling side to side, they're holding it together.
We've all done the pee-pee dance, yeah.
We've all done a pee-pee dance for sure. And they're just trying to hold it in so much. So lots of parents would be like, oh, that's what's going on. Or kiddos getting really uncomfortable. They can also have spasms happening too if their pelvic floor muscles are super tight, especially if there's gas coming out too. And yeah, they can spot the signs. Once you bring it to their attention, they can spot the signs really easily.
So a lot of the things you're talking about in terms of talking to the parents feels like a lot of this is going to be psychological behavior change. Like, and you did advanced education on this. How much were you taught? How much do you refer out? How much did you learn yourself? Because it feels like this is a lot of behavior on top of physical and biomechanics.
Yeah, so I did learn a lot myself. I also have a bachelor's in psychology, so
There
I've studied
you go.
yeah, it does help. But I definitely didn't learn any of this in my bachelor's degree either. Um, but I do have a couple of psychiatrists and psychologists that I refer out to when needed. And I've been really thankful to network in my area, and I have two in particular. One just retired, and she was more play-based therapy. Another one is more talk therapy, so I send older kids to him. But it really does help with those behavioral strategies. But as physical therapists in our PEDS realm, we are trained in those behavioral strategies. So if you think of working with kiddos who have any sort of attention issues, either ADHD or autism, we know how to work with those kids. If you apply those behavioral adjustment principles to any kiddo, any adult too, you're going to see great behavioral changes. So with my kids, I will do, for example, this one little girl, she was always fighting her parents, and she was, I think, 5 years old at that point. She was always fighting them when it was time to sit on the potty. So, well, do you have a chart, a schedule chart? And so they added in, okay, we do lunch, we do playtime, we sit on the potty, then we do whatever else. And by adding that in, she then was able to know what came next, and she stopped fighting them. She also, this same little girl, her breakthrough and her last ability to go potty every single day by herself was adding in a help chart. So school wanted her to be independent with bowel movements on the potty and cleaning herself up and just pottying in general. She was good for pee, but not great for poop, which, I mean, at age 5 is pretty common. So what we did was a help chart, and she had 4 options. She could pick her help. So if she wanted mom or dad to stand in the bathroom with her, if she wanted help undressing, wiping, or redressing, then she got to pick which help she got. And for her, that gave her control. So the one things, if you think about kiddos, what can they actually control in their life? How much, how much they put in and how much they get out, essentially.
Right.
So they can close the top and the bottom, and that's about it. But otherwise, they don't have a lot of control. So giving these kiddos more control can sometimes help with these issues. I've also had kiddos that was the only time they got one-on-one with parents. And so we had to find another avenue for kiddos to spend more quality time rather than 20 minutes sitting on the toilet trying to have a poop or saying, wait, I don't think I got everything out, just so mom would stay longer. There was one boy I treated in Michigan who, I think he had like 6 or 7 older siblings. And they ended up, it was pretty sad. They took the doors off the bathroom because he would spend over an hour in there trying to poop. But he finally told me, it's the only alone time that I get. So that's why I stay in there for so long. So trying to find the root of some of these issues can be really psychological.
I was going to say, is this so you're going to say it depends because everybody's different, but is this more often a psychological issue that manifests physically, or a physical issue that manifests and then does some psychological things, or it's chicken and egg?
It's definitely chicken and egg. So it's both. It's always both. So whether it starts as psychological, I have one little girl I'm seeing now, they started on a road trip moving from the West Coast to the East Coast, and they took like a week and a half, and she refused to poop for that entire week and a half. She was perfectly fine and regular. And then that snowballed into more physical issues. I have other kids who have these physical issues, right? So they are not getting everything out each time. Maybe they went from pooping in diapers to pooping on the toilet, and biomechanically they're not set up well. And so they couldn't get everything out. So now this little 20 to 30% that they're not getting out backs up and up and up and up in the colon. And now they have a psychological issue because when they're pooping, it's like a huge brick, right? And
Sure.
they are having so much pain and discomfort and just trauma from getting out this constipation that's been building up.
All right. Well, you brought up biomechanics. How much of the potty posture, right? We've all seen the videos, right? Squatty potty. How much of this potty posture, what is good potty posture? Is it different for kids than it is for adults? But how much of that posture does that affect pediatric incontinence?
A lot. So if we aren't positioned well on the toilet, we can't get everything out. So if you think of a kiddo who is 4 feet tall, right, and you put them on one of our toilets, the toilets now are huge. Their feet are going to be dangling. I don't know, if you can think about sitting on like a bar height stool, your feet are dangling. You kind of feel like you're going to fall off if you don't have some foot support.
Sure.
And that's the same with them on the toilet. So they clench or they hold on with their hands to try not to fall in or to try not to fall off. And that clenching of all of their muscles, their glutes, everything will prevent the pelvic floor from being able to relax. So it's more important in kiddos to be positioned properly on the potty. So getting them a footstool, getting them a toilet topper, ring reducer, whatever it takes for them to be super comfortable, or using a small potty at first and then transitioning to the bigger potty. I had one client that I saw that they bought their child a fully functioning, just miniature toilet in her room, and because she had an in-suite bathroom, which was pretty posh for a 3-year-old. It's great, but they bought her a biomechanically sized model for her when she started potty training, which was amazing.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
It's going above and beyond for the kid right there. But
I know.
sure, it helped out.
Yeah, she did great, but going then on other toilets was an issue. So trying to figure out what's going to work best for kiddos in the long run is always helpful.
Yeah. You mentioned treatment, you mentioned some anatomy. Let's go further up. Intestines are muscles. And you've mentioned training, retraining. What's your approach for treating them in terms of the intestines in pediatric cases?
Yeah, so a lot of the kiddos that I see have slower bowel motility, and some providers, some MDs or urologists or even GIs will tell you the corn test, which I love, is
What's the corn test?
so the corn test, if you've never done it, please do it. It's where you essentially eat corn for one meal and see how long it takes for you to poop it out, because corn does not break down in our system, so it looks the same as when you ingested it. So you eat it for one meal only, and then you spot it in your poop. It's a beautifully scientific thing to do. Kids love it. If they have siblings, I tell them it's the corn poop race, and they all search for it. They are just so excited of who can poop out corn the first time. Um, so you can see, so normal bowel motility is anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. That's 1 to 3 days. That's a pretty long variation. So 24 to 36 hours is usually what my kiddos will be at when they're having daily or frequent enough bowel movements. But I've had some kiddos that will have corn in their poop at 2 days, at 4 days, and then a week later. And so you know that their bowel motility is not where it needs to be. So it's not a precise test, right? We can't use it as the end all be all diagnostic, but it's fun. Kids like it. It's an easy test to see sort of what's going on. And then I can address them with electrical abdominal stimulation. So I use just a regular abdominal stimulation unit. I put it on their belly. I train parents how to do it at home. There's actually a lot of really good evidence to show how well it works in the pediatric population, which is sort of unheard of for something like this. So in 2 to 4 weeks, a lot of kiddos will either reduce or eliminate their ankle paresis, reduce or eliminate their urinary accidents during the day as well, improve their bowel frequency. So I normally keep my kiddos on it for about 3 to 6 months for daily use or 5 to 7 times a week use, depending on what's going on with them. And they make exceptional progress because it's smooth muscle, right? Intestines are
Mhm.
smooth muscle. We can't voluntarily contract them, but with electrical stimulation, we can. And so we can affect change on those smooth muscles just as we would on a skeletal muscle.
I just got really nervous because I just shifted weight in my seat, and I'm like, is she gonna like read into that? Like, she gonna think I have to go to the bathroom? Like, no, no, I was just shifting weight, everybody. That's all I was doing.
It's okay.
Um,
My 2.5-year-old, she will shift weight and then she'll let out a toot, and she's like,
well, she's got to be the most
it's pretty
comfortable
funny.
talking about it because I'm guessing like you're pretty comfortable, and that's just how it works, right? The more
Yeah,
comfortable you are, the more comfortable kids are around it.
100%. One of the lectures that I did, I got invited to present at a pediatric like monthly meeting essentially it was with I think there were like 30 pediatricians in the area. And my first opening line whenever I do any sort of presentation is, who pooped today? You know, did you poop today? Raise your hand. And no one raised their hand. They said, so you're all constipated. This is great, right? You'll have a lot to talk about with these kiddos. And I said, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you poop today? And most of them raised their hand. I said, if you
Right.
aren't comfortable talking about your own bowel movements, how do you expect a child to talk about their
Yeah.
bowel movements with a stranger?
Right.
They
Never.
won't.
No way.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. So talking about that in terms of like being uncomfortable or hiding it, I'm sure there are kids who might be hiding incontinence and the challenges that that probably brings up as well.
Yeah. The older they get, right? The kids get mean. Kids
Or
will
yeah,
say, oh, you
socially
stink.
acceptable or, yeah.
Yeah, kids get super mean. Oh, you're smelly. Oh, I can see you peed your pants. And that sometimes starts around age 6, which is really unfortunate. So the older they get, the more they try and hide what's going on. So parents will find underwear stashed throughout the house or even in the trash can, or kiddos will change as soon as they get home, or they'll keep an extra set of clothing in their backpack. I treated one gymnast, or I think gymnast, who she at practice would always wear multiple pairs of shorts. So no one could see that she leaked every time she landed. So the older they get, they're definitely hiding it. Any sort of incontinence, they're going to try and hide because they think, oh, no one else is going through this. But
Right.
30% of kids are experiencing constipation. That's a huge amount of kiddos. It's 5% of pediatrician appointments each year, which I think that is grossly underestimated for constipation. Because if you think about kiddos coming in with delayed potty training or urinary accidents or fecal accidents, those are all related to constipation. And so a 16-year-old isn't going to tell you, yeah, I'm peeing my pants every day. They're just going to try and drink less water or hide what's going on.
Yeah, they're going to do it just like the pediatricians. We're just going to ignore it. We're not going to talk about it. They learn from us. We're the ones
Right.
that are wrong, and we just keep repeating that sort of thing.
Right.
Is there anything I didn't ask in terms of common misconceptions? And this, I want you to go for a couple different audiences. Other providers, because you said about 30% of the people that you treat are kids of other providers, or the other 70%, which is our people who have kids but maybe don't have a health background. Other misconceptions that you get commonly.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So, from parents, one huge misconception is that my kiddo can't be constipated, they're pooping every day. Well,
Okay.
even if they're pooping every day, they might not be getting everything out.
Yeah.
And if they're not getting everything out, then it just continues to back up in the colon even more. So then we see this cyclical pattern of, 5 or 6 days, maybe even 2 weeks of medium poops, and then the accidents start for a couple days, and then they have these colossal poops that clog the toilet or happen for a couple days, or kiddos get sick and they start vomiting from it. That is functional constipation. So even if they're going every single day, it doesn't mean that things are going well, right? It just means that the body is starting to compensate and stretch the rectum.
So what are some of the questions you'll ask there in terms of like consistency and viscosity and
Mhm.
things like that?
Yeah, consistency. What do the poops look like? Are you having mashed potato poops? Are you having ripe bananas? Are they looking, nobody really knows milk duds anymore. So you have
Yeah.
to sort of adjust. Like, are they Tootsie Rolls all stuck together? But if you've ever had a box of milk duds like sit in the heat for a little bit, they're all lumped together, right? But you can see the little balls of duds. So that's bad poops essentially, or too hard of poops. Are they having mixed media? I call them mixed media poops. Is it, like mashed potatoes, but then at the front of it is like a big old pile of marbles or pebbles, is it mixed together? That's a sign of functional constipation. I always tell them just to do the corn test to see what happens, see what you find. And they go, we waited for 4 or 5 days and we didn't see any corn. Well, you probably have some slower bowel motility, or we saw corn, for 4 days in a row. So those are the kiddos who, really need some adjustments. Those are the types of questions that I asked. Another misconception, which is huge for kids, and they're so smart with it. The more accidents, the more pee accidents I have, well, the less water I'm going to drink because then I won't
Yeah.
have as many accidents. And they're so smart to think that way, but it's actually the opposite
Oh.
because when our urine is more concentrated, it becomes more irritating to the bladder. So you're
Mm.
actually more likely to have an accident the less urine you have in your bladder, the more higher concentration there is. So you can sort of drown out the urine and flush it out, and then it will be less irritating. We still need to clear up the constipation, but the more water you drink, the less constipation you'll have, and the more bowels will be functioning.
Talking a lot about food and water. I'm guessing another person in your, referral repertoire is a nutritionist.
Sometimes families are maxed out though. They say, I can't go to another provider. Yeah, a dietitian or a nutritionist. So it depends on their area. It also depends on state licensure, who you would send them to.
Right.
But a lot of times parents will say, I'm not going to another provider. So we follow just a general 5 servings of fruits and veggie rule. Anywhere from about 25 grams of fiber is what most people should be getting above age 6 or 7. There's a good body of evidence that will show the more fiber you get, the better. However, it depends on the type of fiber. So you
Right.
have soluble fiber, which will turn the poop into, I always say, like a jet puff marshmallow, right? It's a little bit sticky. It will give it some bulk. It will help everything move through the intestines. And then you have insoluble fiber, which doesn't dissolve in water. And those are like nuts and seeds, and they will pull more water in. They will help to speed up the poop. So we want a good balance of the two. So normally we can take care of that together through just a dietary log, seeing what they're eating, adding things to it. I don't like to take away from kids because they have a rough enough go right now
Right.
anyways. So if we can add flax seeds to their mac and cheese, or whatever else they're eating and they're enjoying, if we can add some things to it, then we're in a better model for them to be compliant too, because you also walk that fine line of them having a poor relationship with food, and we definitely don't want to do that. um, yeah.
When when if a parent's listening or a provider who maybe doesn't treat kids is listening, what's the line? When would you like someone to call and come to see you? Like what's the like you just said, like some kids are just providered out or doctored out, and I'm sure parents are, there's vaccine schedules and they're provided out. What's the line where it's like, yeah, you should go?
Anytime you have that gut feeling that something is going wrong, pediatricians oftentimes will say they'll grow out of it. If you are asking the pediatrician about it, go see someone. Go
Yeah.
see a pediatric PT or a pediatric pelvic health PT, or OT. There's a lot of great OTs that treat pediatric pelvic health too. Go see someone as soon as you think it might be an issue, because it's so much faster to resolve. So
Yeah.
if they end up getting a stretched out rectum, it could take up to a year for it to shrink back down. That's a long time for kiddos of being on laxatives from GIs or doing exercises or having a belly stimulator. It's really taxing to work at this for that long. It weighs on everybody in the whole family, right? I've had parents say we have to create our vacation schedule around Johnny's poop. So it's so taxing on families the further on down the road you get.
I mean, with a lot of things that we and being anybody listening is an expert on, it's like, man, if you just come to me 6 months sooner, this thing would have been done. And I'm sure you might see that a lot. Where a lot of times, myself included, you might not want to go and open that can of worms. Right, just more food and animal analogies here. But you're like,
Mhm.
oh, it's gonna take forever. Pediatrician said I'll grow out of it. I really don't want to dig into this. And meanwhile, there's someone like you going, well, if you'd come, I could have given you 3 things that you could do on your own, and you would have been done. You'd have been glad you came here. You'd have been done 6 months sooner.
Yeah, and for most families, it's often more like 4 or 5 years by
Wow.
the time they get to me. So
Wow.
I have a set of teenagers that I'm treating right now, and they've had these issues for 8 years. And they've just been kicked around by different providers, and people say, oh, we'll try this. Oh, just do Kegels. Oh, just do this. And nobody really addressed the root of the issue, which was their constipation. Or I have kiddos who have been through the ringer. I had one teenager I saw that went to a cardiologist and a neurologist and a urologist and a gastroenterologist. They went to everyone. And then finally someone gave them to me and they said, well, you've got dyssynergic defecation. Your pelvic floor muscles are contracting when you are trying to let the poop out. And so your body isn't able to let it out effectively. And so I was able to then get him to a GI who could help address that. He ended up needing Botox, or not necessarily needing Botox, but he went the Botox route. So it's a long road for a lot of families.
Wow. I'm learning so much. And now I don't know how long it'll be before I eat pudding again, but now I understand some things.
Probably never.
All right. Let me see. We're going to do a game called Overrated, Underrated. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
All right.
This is the PT Pintcast.
All right. I'm going to give you a topic, and you're going to tell me if it's overrated or underrated and why. So we're going to do 5 of these. First, public awareness of pediatric incontinence. Is that overrated or underrated?
Oh, it's completely underrated. People don't even know what is going on. They just think that, 5-6-year-olds, yeah, it's totally normal that they pee themselves sometimes.
Yeah,
It's not.
the whole normal. Oh, it's I've heard this before. Thing winds up making a lot of things pretty miserable.
Yeah.
All right, overrated, underrated. Standard potty training methods are the things that mostly everybody does. Are they okay, or should we be doing something different? Overrated, underrated.
I think they're overrated. I think listening to your kiddo and following their cues says a lot. I think making sure that your kiddo is pooping regularly before you start potty training is such a huge key to success. Most urologists recommend waiting until age 3 for potty training because the body is ready by then. There's a lot of people that say, oh no, start at 18 months. I don't recommend that at all, but definitely overrated for a lot of the potty training. It will come.
All right. Number 3, importance of diet in pediatric pelvic health. Overrated, underrated.
Underrated. Diet plays a huge component. Your poop is what you eat. A lot of it is bacteria, but your poop is essentially what you eat. What you eat fuels the good bacteria in your gut or allows bad bacteria to thrive. So diet is the basis of all of our health. I'm a firm believer in that, and you can really affect a lot of change just by what you're putting into your body.
Use of technology in treating pediatric incontinence. Overrated, underrated.
Oh, both. Can I say both?
Sure.
So biofeedback, I think is overrated for kiddos.
Okay.
I've had a lot of kiddos that are great at biofeedback and can really coordinate the muscles. It's a useful tool for some kids. I've also had a lot of kids that are like, oh yeah, I can just sort of contract my glutes and do what I need to do to make that little like flower bloom or spaceship move, and it's totally fine. But most providers also don't use electrical stimulation in their treatment, and they should, because it is extremely effective. It is super easy. We call it belly tickles. Kids love it, and it works beautifully.
All right, final one. Role of body mechanics education in pediatric therapy. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. You definitely have to have that proper potty posture for kiddos to be more successful in getting everything out. I think some of the extra exercises that we do or we want to do as PTs are overrated. Most parents are compliant with them. And so it just becomes extra stuff for the parents to do or for them to facilitate. I love a couple good, really core exercises, really good core exercises, I should say. You can pull squigs off of a window, and that engages your transverse abdominis. I see you might not know what squigs are. They're little suction cup toys. They're super fun. Yeah, but if you pull them, you will feel the TA contract, and that's a huge, huge way to retrain kiddos how to gently help to push out their poop without bearing down and closing the glottis.
All right, you're off the hot seat for overrated, underrated. That's brought to you by ATI, leading the charge in PT clinical research with more than 900 clinics achieving top marks in CMS's merit-based incentive program. They're the team to join for career growth. Explore opportunities at ATIPT.com. Last thing we do on the show is the parting shot.
On the hot seat with 3 questions this is the parting shot.
There we go. I hit the wrong button. That happens sometimes, Kiley. Parting shot is your last chance for like a mic drop moment or a soapbox statement or something. You got the floor. What's your parting shot?
Yeah, so there's a study out of 2015, it's pretty long ago, that said $3.9 billion was spent every year on GI related costs.
Wow.
So costs related to constipation, any sort of testing, ER visits, healthcare visits, whatever, any sort of laxative to address constipation. If you adjust for inflation, that's almost $7 billion now, and they average it out to about $6,000 in our money now per child per year in
Wow.
constipation related healthcare costs. So if you put that into perspective, which I always try and do, because it sounds like a lot of money, but you don't really know exactly how much money. Taylor Swift's Era Tour will pull in about $6 billion. So if you
Wow.
can imagine stadiums full of
Yeah.
constipated kiddos and their parents just throwing out cash, and if you put it in those terms, people go, oh my gosh, that is huge,
Yeah.
huge amount of money and resources all for constipation.
And it's miserable, like you mentioned, like ruining vacation plans or planning your day around this, or like the psychological stuff it's doing to kids or adults. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
sound good. So this is why everybody should see
Mhm.
Kylie early and often. You're remote, so they should
I
do that.
am. I
Where can
am.
people connect? What's the easiest way for people to find you and connect with you?
My website is kcgpediatricpt.com. I did just start the incontinent child as my Instagram handle a year ago. I'm not great on social media. I don't have a big presence on there. I'm trying because I know how valuable it
Yeah.
is to get this information out, which is why I started it only a year ago. So patients and their friends
I
always
know, but
request
this is
me.
this is the great
Yeah.
thing about social media, or I would say media that's social, is like you put out a video on YouTube and someone, you're like, who on their right mind is, searching like kid won't poop, and then when they see your face and they're like, in 90 seconds you like explained it, they're calling you.
Yeah, my first two videos, I was so shocked, had 100,000 views, which was pretty cool to see how many people the pelvic floor and pediatric pelvic health really sat with them.
Yeah.
And they said, oh my gosh, I got so many parents that messaged me and said, this sounds like my kid. I need some help. I had no idea that this was an issue that could be addressed or could be fixed. I was just told that they were a bad kid, that they were doing it on purpose, or that they would grow out of it.
I mean, that's the definition of innovation, is you find a problem that everybody looks at it and says, not my problem, or they'll grow out of it, or don't worry about it. Like, that's like the intersection you want to be at, where it's an actual problem and you have an actionable
Mhm.
solution. It's a
Mhm.
disservice not to make more videos, Kylie. Take the phone out,
Sorry.
push record. I mean, wouldn't it be, now I'll
Yeah,
act like your social media advisor for a hot second. If you have to answer a
perfect.
question in an email or a text or a phone call more than 2 times, it deserves a video. Now let's be strategic about it. Now we'll go back to what the kids were doing. Put it on your schedule, though. I don't expect you to make that video that day, but say 1/2 day a month. I'm going to now just turn to my list and clear it and do those 5. And the funny part is, the more videos you make, the more questions you'll get. The more questions you get, the more
Yeah,
videos you'll make. But the
yeah,
more people you'll help.
absolutely.
'Cause each one of those things is like a seed you're just flinging out there on the Instagram or the TikTok, and that stuff works.
It works. It works a lot. And I've even had parents message me on Instagram saying, I saw your tips, I tried them, I adjusted our potty posture, we drink more water, and now the incontinence is gone, and now we're pooping more regularly. Like, I didn't even need to see anybody,
Great.
which is huge. Yeah, this knowledge is out there. It's just finding the providers that are willing to share it, for one, or willing to learn it
Well,
as another.
Kylie, there's a lot of bad poop out there, so you got to look and you got to dig and find the corn. It's full
It's
circle.
pretty good.
Comes full
Pretty
circle.
good.
Kylie, we'll put your contact information in the show notes. I appreciate you doing this, being there for those people who need it, because it's going to resonate. Hopefully, the kids aren't going to want to talk about it forever, but they'll be thinking of you forever when they're not thinking about going to the bathroom.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, they say the best conversations happen at happy hour. Thanks for coming to ours.